Niagara River was a very, very important route into Canada and freedom for American slaves in the 19th century. In the wintertime, some of them even ventured on the ice on Lake Erie to cross into Canada, and sometimes the ice broke and they died.
The route north was one of the ending points of the Underground Railroad.
It was, in many cases, an unsophisticated network of fugitive slaves or enslaved people coming up from the south, heading toward the north, and ultimately into Canada.
The Underground Railroad was busiest between 1830 and 1863. During that time, thousands made it to safety in Canada, but thousands more were killed or captured.
For every fugitive that we know made it across, it's fair to say that there's probably 10 that didn't make it.
It was here in Niagara Falls that Harriet Tubman, an escaped slave herself, returned to the U.S. at least 19 times to help others. During the period between 1850 and 1860, she led an estimated 300 people to freedom, many across the Whirlpool Bridge. Today, the harsh reality of the Underground Railroad is regularly revived in tours given by a group called Motherland Connections.
If you would just take a look in there, you can see it just the way it originally looked.
To use tourism to educate the public on the history of the Underground Railroad.
They often start at the Michigan Street Baptist Church in Buffalo.
Churches were key. If you were a former slave and you came into the city of Buffalo, again, you were going to look for the black community, and the black community was always centered around a church because that was everything.
Now, the Michigan Street Baptist Church was one of the first churches in America built by and for blacks. It's one of the first churches which is not a hand-me-down church. The rafters, the beams, the masonry work, all of that were done by the native blacks who lived here.
They also built a hiding place where escaped slaves could wait for the right moment to seize their freedom. Bounty hunters looking to take escaped slaves back to their owners were a constant threat.
So the slave catcher would come into the door. Now the congregation would be singing, and sometimes these songs would serve as messages. You start singing nice and low, somebody in the building.
There's a back stairwell here in the sanctuary, and you can just literally come up the back stairs and out the front door, and if you made a left out this door and ran down the road, you would be on the Erie Canal looking at Canada in a matter of maybe 10 minutes.
Keep going!
Canada and freedom were just minutes away.
Listen, ladies, this is the last leg of the way. We're closer to the border. Freedom is right across there. But you got to listen. The bounty hunter can be anywhere right now. So steer yourself, chillin'. We on our way to freedom, and we ain't turning back. Let's go.
Crossing Niagara's Whirlpool Bridge was the most dangerous part of the journey. Bounty hunters knew it was the place to capture escaped slaves, and the bridge during that time was a swaying suspension bridge that lacked railings. It was here that many a slave's resolve might waver. So when Harriet Tubman led the crossing, she allegedly carried a gun. It wasn't for protection against bounty hunters.
Harriet carried it for fugitives who were scared. And so if you were with her party and you decided you didn't want to go on anymore and you were too scared and you were going to go back to Master, old Master was going to beat it out of you. Where the route was, how many people were with her, Harriet would then threaten to kill that person as opposed to losing the 9 or 10 people that was with her.
Get right, church, and let's go home. Get right, church, and let's go home.
The bridge is probably the most inspirational point on the tour, because we've had people who are very scared of heights, and we tell them, you know, if you're going to get this far and you're going to be scared of heights, are you going to go back into slavery, or are you going to crawl across that bridge and make it to freedom? And they all go across that bridge to make it to freedom.
Don't stop. Don't look down if you're afraid. Keep your head up. Don't you look down, Mary. Come on. Step on up in the freedom. Thank you, Jesus. Freedom. Freedom. Yeah. Freedom, we here. We made it. Thank God I'm free.
It's the most spiritual thing that's ever happened to me, other than giving birth to my children, I think. because you are literally retracing the footsteps.
I just can't imagine the terror they went through, knowing that the bridge was shaking and that they might not make it.
Yes, indeed. I cannot imagine. You know, so it was wonderful, you know, to see the reenactment of it all and then to be a part of it. I'll take that forever with me.
We ain't got to answer to nobody no more, but to ourselves and to the Almighty. And we can make a life for ourselves over here in Canaan land.
For escaped slaves, the sight of Niagara Falls was their first glimpse of freedom, a bright beacon of their new chance at life. 14 million people come to Niagara Falls each year. They are drawn to a natural wonder with an heroic sense of scale. The American Falls are more than 1,000 feet wide, and the Canadian more than twice that, 2,600 feet. Millions of gallons of water cascading ceaselessly, up to 100,000 cubic feet per second, is an awesome sight. But it wasn't always like that. The falls have actually stopped flowing not once, but twice. The first time was in 1848 when an ice storm dammed the river at Buffalo, New York.
People living here knew something was wrong, so they went out of their homes and ran to the falls, and the moon's light, the full moon, was shining on bare rock where the falls had been, and many people had thought that the world had come to an end. They knelt and prayed, they were crying.
When the ice dam broke, the water started flowing again. The second time the falls went silent happened in 1969 when the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers diverted the water from the American side over to the Canadian side.
The plan was to see if those rocks could or should be removed. If they could be removed, that it was felt would improve the appearance of the American Falls. But after several months of studying the problem, it was decided just to leave things as they were, leave it to nature. So the water was turned back on, and that's the way it's been.
For so many visitors, seeing the falls is unlike anything else they've ever experienced.
Oh, they're gorgeous. They're absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, it's awesome. Gave me butterflies when I first looked down. Awesome.
But for as long as visitors have been coming to the falls, just seeing them hasn't been enough. They want to be bowled over by the experience. And for that to happen, you might want to climb aboard a legend called the Maid of the Mist.
That is the way to go. It's unbelievable. The Maid of the Mist goes right up below the falls in the river. It's amazing. I don't know how to describe it. It's just wow.
The Maid of the Mist has been in operation since 1846, and over the years it's carried an estimated 100 million passengers. But in the beginning, the Maid of the Mist wasn't a fun way to spend an afternoon. It was a necessity. There was no bridge across Niagara back in 1846, and the Maid of the Mist ferried people, mail and cargo, across the river until 1848, when the first of 4 bridges was built.
After the bridges were built, the ferry service was redundant, so they started taking people up to the falls. And it's run continuously ever since.
A second boat was added in 1854, but then, in 1955, an accidental fire sparked by a welder's torch destroyed both vessels. Beginning that same year, new steel diesel-powered maids were launched, and these are the boats we see today.
Sometimes the sheer volume of water, I think, just totally amazes people. To see this amount of water coming over the falls 24/7 is actually amazing. You know, and of course, people wonder where it comes from, and we always get the inevitable question, you know, do you pump this all back at night? Again, you know.
Chances are, anytime you fit the Maid of the Mist into your travel plans, you'll probably see and feel something to remember. Though the Maid of the Mist promises excitement, there are those who have always wanted to get even closer to the powerful falls, even if it meant risking life and limb. The preferred vantage point used to be Table Rock, a large flat shelf close to Horseshoe Falls.
To stay standing was not usually possible. You crouched down on all fours, especially if you wanted to go over to the edge of Table Rock and peep over the edge. You didn't do that standing up. You might lose your balance, or the wind currents might knock you over. So you went on all fours to peep over the edge, and it was still frightening.
Eventually, the force of Niagara's water crumbled Table Rock to a fragment. What remained was blasted away for safety reasons in 1935. But adrenaline junkies found another way to get up close and personal with the falls. In 1899, a treacherous tunnel was carved out behind Horseshoe Falls. Plucky visitors had to climb over a crude path of stones and be wary of the thrashing water that wanted to claim them as its own.
I've read several early accounts of visitors who went behind the falls here and returned temporarily deaf because of the tremendous roar. And it was some hours before they got their hearing back.
But a lot has changed since then. The tunnel behind the falls and the area once known as Table Rock have been combined to create an unforgettable attraction. It's called Journey Behind the Falls, and it literally is a journey behind the falls. To get to the incredible window on the falls, you have to take an elevator 125 stories down, then travel through a series of tunnels. Once you get through the underground labyrinth, you are face to face with pure liquid power. And the best part is, you have several viewing options. There's a covered observation deck that gives you an overview of the area. But if you want to feel the power of the gushing water course through you, you can stand on the patio.